Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. And we broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. And teach you what we think you ought to know. We're all volunteers here. No one gets paid. And we don't have any sponsors. So there's no agenda other than we would like to teach. That's it. Truth matters. We're interested in just the truth. And we're interested in sharing ideas and opinions and values and ethics and morals with you. Today we're talking about some tips from my book. I said that I would. And Rich Scheben is joining us. And he'll be sharing some news updates, news in a flash with you. So we're going to intermix the tips from the book, unwritten, or unfinished, I should say. Not for sale. You can't buy it anywhere. It is not published. And this is just a series of tips the way we do things here at the farm. 68 years of experience on how we approach things. So we're not going to take calls today unless you have a tip or tips that you'd like to share from us. So we're going to stay on topic. Be glad to take your calls if you've got a better way of doing something and you can explain it so that we can understand it on the air. We're all ears. All ears. The number to call in if you would like to share that tip or tips, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line is up, 712-770-9418. But I think that's changed. So if you dial that number, it may say there's a different number. And just try that different number. Rich Scheben's welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vince. Happy TGIF to you and to our listeners. And I hope everybody has a nice weekend. I know it's compromising these days with everything we're going through as a nation, as a world. And hopefully we'll get through this and one of these days get back to normal, whatever that definition will be.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I've got a tip for y'all, class. You know, I've been working with electricity since very, very young years, probably 10 years old, maybe even younger than that. And one of the things that you do with electricity is you try to insulate wires from each other. Sometimes you connect them, sometimes you insulate them. But when you insulate them, we typically use black electrical tape. And what I found is that black electrical tape is made incorrectly everywhere, at least from my perspective. It's too wide. It's about 3/4 of an inch wide. It comes on these rolls, and you can get them for roughly $1 a roll. And typically what you do is you just cut off a piece, maybe 3 or 4 inches long, and you wrap it around the connection, where the splice is. And it lasts for a while, but it's not very good. So here's what I do. Now, the idea of the electrical tape is to do two things. One, it's to keep moisture out. And two, it's to keep the bare wire connection under the electrical tape from contacting another surface, like a ground or another wire, or another bare electrical connection. So what I do is I unroll about 5 inches, 4 to 5 inches. And I cut the electrical tape with sharp scissors long ways. So I take that 3/4 of an inch wide electrical tape, and I cut it into 2 lengths of 3/8 of an inch wide electrical tape, let's say 4 or 5 inches long. Now I have a thin piece of electrical tape. And I wrap that really tightly around the insulation, heading toward the connection, over the connection, and then back over where I just taped. So the plan is to put at least 2 layers of electrical tape on the connection. But by cutting it lengthwise in half, it's more narrow, and you can pull it tighter. And it keeps out the moisture better, and it stays in place better because there are no wrinkles in the tape when you do it that way. And you might want to try that. I mean, it's a very simple thing. It doesn't cost a cent. I mean, if you can use electrical tape anyway and you happen to have a pair of scissors, it won't cost you anything to try it. And it really works. Now, sometimes I take that second piece of electrical tape, and I do one of two things with it. I either leave it on the roll so I can use it the next time, or I go over what I just taped with the second piece. Now, where does this really work well? Sometimes if you have a nick in a wire that's under a car, you can tape that up. And why would you do that? Because in the wintertime, if we ever get allowed to drive again, if we ever have a vehicle on the road again, the salt in the spray that comes up from the salted roads, even if it's not snowing, the salt is still there for weeks. It will get into the metal conductor, typically copper, and it will corrode it very, very quickly. So if I have a nick in a wire, I will tape that up. I'll remove, I'll use a Q-tip and remove whatever dust, whatever salt and corrosion is on the connection. I'll make sure the connection's good, and then I'll tape it up to prevent further damage. So that's just one tip, and it's worked for me for a really, really long time, at least 50 years. But I've never seen anybody recommend it. Never. Nowhere. There's no mechanic I've ever heard of that said, hey, here's what you should consider doing. Any comments, Rich Scheben?
Not particularly about that, but just regarding general comment about self-sufficiency. Folks, with everything that's happening, we've talked about starting a vegetable garden, and you can see how we're being biologically, chemically, technologically, politically correctly, and psychologically hunted down. And this cookie-cutter follower, politically correct subdivision mentality of the living in urban, suburban America, we have to start asking ourselves, how long is it going to last under the circumstances, financially, economically, socially, and politically? So I think, listening to Vince, listening to the instructors talk about self-sufficiency in general is going to be the only option for the bottom 93%, because everything is so corrupt, so manipulated, and opportunities are not based on hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications anymore in America. So thinking outside the box, doing things yourself, I think, is going to be the only way to survive. Vince?
Okay, so yesterday we were sitting around the kitchen table, and I mentioned oil changes to our family. And I said, I believe that the Chinese factory outlet has shut down their oil change operation. Now, their oil change operation is typically, you drive up to the garage bay, and as soon as the guy in front of you has his vehicle done, then yours goes in. You go for a quick oil change. Now, I certainly am not recommending going there because I don't think that they spend enough time to do a good job. And I've heard of a lot of damage that they've done to cars because they have a lot of untrained people working underneath cars. Well, and on top of cars. So I asked our son, why don't you just check and see if they're open? He got on the computer, and the local supercenter has stopped changing oil on vehicles. That means the battery, lube, and oil change bays are closed, and tires too. So now one of the biggest outlets for oil changes and tires and batteries is closed. So I said, well, why don't you check Springfield, see what's happening there? I said, well, they're all shut down, Dad. I said, yeah, that's what I thought. because that's what I reported on the air here weeks ago, that they did that. And it looks like they're still closed. So to tie that to what Rich Scheben just said is you have to pay attention to these things for yourself. So you may not be able to go to a place to have your vehicle serviced. So the simple things you need to learn how to do, like right now. And you can look them up. You can go onto YouTube and you can look up, how do you change your tire? How do you do that? What's a safe way to do it? And look at a couple of videos. Don't look at just one, because one guy might give you the wrong advice. You know, for example, you can jack up your car and have it roll down the street. Okay, so you need to chock the wheels. You need to set the parking brake. You need to set the vehicle in park. But if it's front-wheel drive and you jack up the front wheels, you might be putting your front wheels in the locked position with the transmission, so it won't roll down the hill. But if you jack up the front wheels, it will roll down the hill. So you need to be really careful and pay attention to how your car operates. Now, how do you know how to do that? Well, it's in your owner's manual. It's that manual that hardly anybody reads. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have not read their owner's manual. And whenever I buy a new car, well, new to me, a new car to me would be maybe 20 years old. I read the owner's manual. I want to know how everything goes. I want to know where to check the lubricants. I want to know the service frequency. I want to know how often they want me to check the differential fluid, the transmission fluid, how often to change the transmission fluid, how often to change the oil filter, how often I need to grease it, where I need to grease it, how often I need to check the air filters. Now, I know all that, right? But I read it anyway, because I want to make absolutely sure I run through my mind one more time exactly where all of these locations are for all of these Zerk, Z-E-R-K fittings are. Those are the grease fittings. So that's just a thought, and that's why I wanted to mention electrical tape. There's another thing we probably ought to mention, and this is something that many of you may not have heard about, and I'm going to spell it. D-I, this is one word, D-I electric. D-I-E-L-E-C-T-R-I-C, dielectric. That means non-conductive. Well, there's a grease that is non-conductive. It's a silicone-based grease, and it's designed to seal moisture out and prevent corrosion on electrical connections or connectors. It can also disrupt the electrical current flow. So what's it good for? Well, if any of you have tried to remove spark plug boots from a spark plug that's been in play for, 50,000 miles, and it's gotten hot and cold and hot and cold, it's been under the hood, and the siliconized rubber tends to deteriorate, the spark plug boots tend to stick to the spark plugs, to the insulators. It's really hard to get them off, and sometimes you break the spark plug wires when you take off these boots. Now, that can be a really expensive proposition, because if you have to buy new spark plug wires and you have an 8-cylinder car and you break 3 of them or 2 of them or 1 of them, and you buy a whole new set, it might be $40, $50, $60, $100. Now, if you take a Q-tip and you buy some dielectric grease, which is about $6 for a small tube, and you put a very small amount on the end of a Q-tip and you wipe it on the inside of the spark plug boot, the siliconized rubber part that contacts the spark plug itself, that won't happen. It'll be very easy to remove in the future. I'll give you one more tip about that when we come back. So I was talking about a couple of tips, electrical tape and dielectric grease. Now, I looked on the internet, dielectric grease, 3-ounce tube, so it's a small tube. It's like a toothpaste tube, but much smaller. 3 ounces, $6.99 on Amazon. Now, I'm not recommending you buy it from Amazon. I'm just giving you that as a representative price. And I've had a tube, I still have about a third of it left, and it's the same tube I've been using for 15 years. Okay? So it lasts a very long time to use a very small amount. So you can put it on the end of a Q-tip, wipe it on the inside of the spark plug boots so that you have a nice slippery connection, and the spark plug boot and the spark plug terminal will connect much easier. And by preventing moisture from getting in there, the connections will last longer and you'll have a better spark. Also on the distributor cap nipples, that would be the same kind of it's like a spark plug boot, but It's on the distributor cap, and they're called nipples. You can put it on there, too. Ignition coil connectors. We put it on there. Headlamp connectors. And we also put it on the light bulbs, the automotive, not household light bulbs. Not household light bulbs. Automotive light bulbs. So you have headlights and tail lights and side marker lights. And they typically have a socket that you put the bulb into. Well, that connection between the socket and the bulb will typically corrode because of the salt. And if you have brass sockets, like an older style, like an 1157 type bulb from the 60s and the 70s, they tend to corrode with the salt in the air, the salt mist from these, the spraying of salt on the side, on the highways. Well, if you take that Q-tip and you wipe the inside of the socket, the brass socket, or whatever the socket may be made out of, and you put some on the bulb connection, not on the glass, lens, if you will, of the bulb, not on there, only on the connection surface, it will tend to last a lot longer, and you won't have anywhere near as many problems as you do if you don't do that. So I wanted to share those tips with you, and we can go to Rich Scheben, his thoughts, and maybe news in a flash. Rich, any comments on what I said about those connectors?
Well, you know what?
Bulbs?
You know what, Vince? I think what would be a really great idea today, I know my regular day is Tuesday, so I'm trying to stay in the background today, but how about when you talk about specific self-sufficiency, I'm going to talk about why you need to leave the city, go more rural, and be more self-sufficient. How does that sound when you give me a little airtime?
Yeah, you got it right now.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to mention an article. New York issues do not resuscitate order for cardiac patients. Do you really want to live in New York City? Watch New York Governor Cuomo says his life is more important than yours. Running out of money is no big deal, and you get an essential job if you are suffering so bad. So what's going to be dubbed essential, folks, if you live in cities or blue states? What's the definition? Is it going to be if you tattletale on your neighbors, if you censor or surveil your neighbors, if you repeat politically correct second-hand, third-hand, fourth-hand information, rumors, gossip, hearsay? What's going to be dubbed essential? And I've got to repeat what I've said last time I was on the air, that Los Angeles mayor says if you don't do what he tells you to do, he's going to shut off your power and water. Okay, this is totalitarian USSR dictator-type stuff. And the George Washington Bridge, and I've traveled over that when I lived in New York many times, probably thousands of times in my early life, the George Washington Bridge, I read, is charging trucks $100 to go across into New York City each way. And, boy, I could see commercial real estate in those areas and food prices going, commercial real estate dropping through the basement, and food going through the roof, and social distancing rules the way that they have. How the heck can anybody under the present circumstances think they're going to eke out a living in urban, suburban America under these conditions? Vince?
I was thinking about the resuscitation. So a good Samaritan could be just walking down the sidewalk, seeing someone in distress, and the guy's flat on the sidewalk, and the Good Samaritan jumps in and starts resuscitating him. And I can just imagine people picking up their cell phones, calling 911, demanding that the police show up to help protect the guy who's being resuscitated from the guy who is trying to save his life. Because it may look like the guy is beating up the guy who just fell down on the sidewalk. Can you imagine that? We'll be right back. Okay, Rich Scheben's with us, live in Montana. So I've got some bad news for you, class. The FCC, Federal Communications Commission, just voted to free up 6 gigahertz spectrum in the United States. And this means that more airwaves for internet routers, less latency, and faster speeds. And roughly 3 times the speed of your traditional router, okay, the 2.4 gigahertz router, or the cell phone area on the or cell phone spectrum. 2.4 gigahertz. It's going to be 6 gigahertz, and it has been approved. So it's touted as the biggest upgrade in 20 years in Wi-Fi. So people are excited because faster. It's going to go much faster. So here's the way to look at this. So there's the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum, the 5 gigahertz, and the 6 gigahertz spectrums. Okay. So what happens in terms of throughput, meaning how much data can go across the frequencies at one time, you get more throughput with 6 gigahertz, much more throughput with 6 gigahertz than you do with 2.4 gigahertz. But the range for 2.4 gigahertz is farther than 6 gigahertz. And latency, that's the delay, is much longer for 2.4 gigahertz than is for 6 gigahertz. So what does the GDP benefit from this? Well, they get more throughput and less delay. So they're probably really excited about this. So that's where we are with Wi-Fi. Faster Wi-Fi is coming to pollute an area near you very soon. So here we are. This decision from the FCC puts pressure on regulators in other countries who will need to catch up with the U.S. So we are spearheading some of this technology. So to recap, Wi-Fi 6 is the new standard in Wi-Fi technology. It's promising better speeds. Devices everywhere are set to adopt the new standard over the next year, and the technology promises to better handle more devices using Wi-Fi simultaneously, greater security using a new standard called WPA3, and the battery life will be extended because it decreases the amount of the device's use of electricity. Okay, and more information can be delivered even faster using a combination of new software and hardware. So more faster, better, except if you happen to be in the room or the area where these waves are, and they will disrupt your immune system even more.
Yep.
So if you don't care about your health, this is like a great thing. But if you do care about your health, it's a terrible thing. And it's brought to you by the Federal Communications Commission. Any comments, Rich?
Well, yeah, first of all, Netflix stock is going through the roof, even though they haven't made much money, if any, right now. And I believe everything's going to change. And I'm trying to, and this is the reason why I'm doing these shows, Vince, because I'm trying to give people ideas and solutions, and hopefully things will get better in America. But we can't look at one thing fixing it all. It's analogous to vaccines. When you look at the package insert, you look at the side effect profile, you look at the adverse events, the contraindications. You know, they're talking about, when we talk about lowering immune system and nanotechnology and chips in your body and your phone next to your ear and Wi-Fi in your home and smart meter, electromagnetic radiation, never mind 5G, we're talking, the reason why I mentioned the package insert for drugs is because when you look at the side effect profile, the adverse events and contraindications, they're paragraphs long. Every body works differently, whether it be through vibrations, electromagnetic radiation, and some bodies don't have tolerance. And we have to start looking at, you know, getting off of Netflix and getting out in the garden and playing in the dirt and building your immune system. You know, even the governor of West Virginia says, looks like after this pandemic, there's going to be a massive return to rural life. I mean, we have to look at what the agenda, the powers that be, have created for us. And the money is not going in the pockets of the little guy, the bottom 93%. Here's an article, 6 senators unanimously passed a $483 billion spending boom for American billionaires, which makes them richer now since the pandemic. And big banks are even getting bigger. Now, keep in mind, we're bailing out the banks several times. They're getting free money, charging us so-called fees to process loans, and then they charge interest to us on top of that. So the risks to the bank are nil, and the taxpayer pays for everything through taxes and inflation. And this is what's happening. We have to look at the agenda behind everything that's happening, like this virus thing. It's an agenda against the patriots and Trump. It's for forced austerity. It's to crash the economy. It's to get rid of cash because they say it's dirty in order to create a government-centralized cryptocurrency. It's technology controlled by China with the help of the UN, the World Health Organization, Hollywood, Soros, and Gates, and more. It's to create social distancing, to make us more submissive and break our will. It's to eliminate voting legitimacy. Let's vote by mail so we can rig everything. It's to eliminate the Constitution, freedom, liberty, and the rule of law. And food shortages. That's why this West Virginia governor is saying that there's going to be a massive return to rural life, because we don't have, everything's been modified in the laboratories, proteins, amino acid, enzymes. We don't have any nutrition left, and that's what's affecting our immune system. The continued fake information from the mainstream media, depopulation events, forced vaccines, which, again, lowers our immune system for the purpose of an immunity passport, forced lockdowns, which is house arrests, while they're constructing new 5G towers where you live, delegitimizing work. Right now, unemployment's 23%. This is what happens, Vince, when we allow divide and conquer strategies and political correctness to occur and people don't say anything. As long as we keep sticking up for our group, our hyphen and pronoun, we're going to destroy America through divide and conquer techniques, chaos, infighting, race wars, gender wars, you name it. So get back to the country, folks. Build your immune system. Build your skill sets. That's one of the reasons why Vince talks about all these little ideas and solutions that could make you more self-sufficient. And eight meat-packing plants close in weeks across America, stoking food shortage fears. I mean, this is how are we going to survive, folks, if we don't go to the country and start growing our food, raising our animals, harvesting wood for heat, thinking outside the box, and being more self-sufficient? I just see everything breaking down. Credit and debt distress in corporate debt, mortgage debt, municipal markets, consumer debt, emerging markets, federal debt, commodities. Defaults, delinquencies, and bankruptcies are going through the roof. Consumer confidence and optimism is going down through the basement. How much money printing is going to occur before we really lose consumer confidence in the Federal Reserve note? I think it's all speculation right now, but the only way, Vince, I see the little guy surviving is moving to rural America and being self-sufficient, especially in the realm of food and water and natural resources, and living off the land and living below their means and staying out of debt, except for their house and their land. Vince?
Well, you're not going to believe this.
I'll believe
I
anything.
got the most. Well, no, this is really good news. It's hard to believe I'm saying that, right? I was on the phone yesterday. A man called me, and he said he wanted to buy a cow and a calf from us. And so I asked him about it, and, we were talking, and he's got about 10 acres. So he's doing exactly what you're talking about, Rich. But here's how he's doing it. He is taking that $1,200 check that the government is sending, and he's going to buy a cow and a calf with it. Is that great news or what?
Oh, that's intelligent news. That's where money should be going, is to building skill sets, thinking outside the box, learning how to butcher, learning how to skin, learning how to gut an animal, learning how to take care of them. Not to mention the fact that you can control your own destiny with meat that's not grown in a laboratory or that's GMO. That's absolutely the right thing to do.
Here's what he's going to do. Here's what he's going to do. So his plan is to have the cow and the calf, the mama and the baby, and, in a while, let's say 6 months or so, borrow a bull and get the mama pregnant again, and not the calf, though, just the mama. And then in 2 years or so, have the calf get pregnant. And so we'll take the cow and the calf, and he'll have 4 in a few years. So he will double his herd in 4 years. And then as he continues, maybe he can buy the property next door and expand his operation. And that's what we did. I mean, we bought pregnant cows, Black Angus pregnant cows, and we built our herd from those Black Angus pregnant cows. And then we bought a bull, and then we had more cows and more cows and more cows and so forth. And that's what we did. And that's how, and you know, that's what farming is all about. And so if you're willing to start small, you can do that. And you can start your herd with, you know, less than $1,000 or about $1,000. Or depending on what kind of animals you buy, you know, if you want to buy just a couple calves, maybe $800, 2 $400 calves, or 2 $500 calves. And off you go. So I wanted to read something to you, Rich. Your name is in this. And it says, let's see. Okay. This is an email I received. Dear Vincent, I appreciate your show with Rich. It reinforced my resolve to continue to prepare. I think our country is severely harmed by this corona panic. I'm going to grow, preserve, dehydrate, and stock up as much as I can throughout the spring and the summer. Who knows what this fall and winter will bring? I just wanted to let you know that you have impacted me to continue and not stop preparing. What do you think about that? Is that nice or what?
Well, yeah, it's that's what we try to do, is to get people to not give up, get people to stick to whatever their plan may be. You know, that's one of the reasons why I always dovetail financial, economic, social, and political rationale together so we can connect the dots and follow the money and the corruption and the manipulation, and at the same time give certain ideas and solutions how to control one's own destiny. That's what this show is all about.
Controlling your own destiny, making your preparations, avoiding mistakes. That's what we're trying to teach. And we've got a caller from New Jersey on the line. We're going to be with you in just a couple minutes after these few short commercial announcements. Rich Scheben and I will be right back. Rich Scheben's with us, and joining us from New Jersey, aren't you? Am I saying that right? Am I pronouncing your name right?
Yeah, it's Arjun.
Arjun. Okay, welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. So I was wondering that if somebody has never done farming, if they don't know anything about farming, and you were explaining that you can grow your garden just close to your kitchen, how can they go about learning how to grow any of these crops like potatoes or maybe onions, tomatoes? And even if we grow the thing that we talk about in radio show, that food is going to be, there will be a shortage of food, and if that's going to happen, would your garden be at risk also, that somebody else can come and steal your food from your garden also?
Okay, to address your last question first, having a garden, is at a risk? Absolutely, because I believe that people will behave differently when they're hungry as compared to the good old days when they had plenty of money and plenty of food in their bellies. So people who are desperate do desperate things. So you're absolutely right. So in terms of advertising, your garden, I wouldn't do that. As a matter of fact, during the Great Depression, the first one, back in the 1930s and 1940s, people put up fences around their backyards to kind of hide their gardens, okay? Because fences that were difficult to climb, because there are plenty of lazy people who would be delighted to help you eat your tomatoes and your produce. So that's a problem. That's a problem. And if you live in close proximity to other people, I don't know how you're going to fix that. Now, what you can do is if you have a porch and it's in the sun, the sun's on it most of the day, southern-facing porch, you can get buckets 5-gallon buckets and drill a hole roughly a quarter of an inch in diameter, maybe 4 holes around the base of that bucket, 1 inch off the bottom. Okay, so water will drain out except for the bottom 1 inch. And you can plant bucket tomatoes, bucket lettuce, and so forth. And it works. It absolutely works. Bucket peppers. So here on our farm, we have these, they're called lick tubs. They're about 20 gallons in capacity. They're low, maybe 2 feet tall. They're about a little smaller than a hula hoop in diameter. And we feed the cows protein in the winter in these tubs. And when the tubs are empty, we rinse them out, put some soil in it, some lime, and we plant, and I put some peat moss in there as well. And we plant lettuce and tomatoes and peppers and so forth. And the idea of having it next to your kitchen or close to your kitchen is because if it is, you'll take care of it. If it's in the corner of the property where you have to go out of your way to get to it, it's too far and it gets neglected. And bringing water to it is, much more difficult unless you have water over there. So the plan is to keep it close, keep an eye on it, and it will do much better. Now, right now you can, consider lettuce, and you can consider buying some pepper plants and buying some tomato plants if there's in a place where you can safely buy them already started, because it's going to take several weeks for them to, probably almost 2 months to get to the point where you can plant them. So if you start with seeds. Rich Scheben, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll tell you something. When you were talking about lettuce and things like that, spinach, cabbage family like cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, that type of thing. Root crops, all cold weather and root crops are very, very easy to grow, sir. All you need is sun, water, and soil. And I recommend putting raised beds. Use anything as a barrier. I just get logs off my property and I make a rectangle. And then I put in soil. And I always have a compost pile. So every time you throw something away, especially that's organic, from an eggshell to a radish top to a tomato stem, it doesn't matter. I have a little hobby farm here, so I got Great Pyrenees guard dogs. I have goats and chickens, and if my leftovers don't go to those three, they go into the compost pile. And I use the manure from the goats and the chickens, and I literally make my own soil. So what you could do, if you live in urban, suburban America and you want to stay there, I would get some type of barrier. And it doesn't have to be expensive, doesn't have to be fancy, something that will hold a minimum of 8 inches of dirt. Minimum. I prefer 2 feet, but I'm saying minimum. Get some soil, go to your nursery, your landscaping outfit place, and put in the soil in the raised beds, and you can start gardening right away.
Yeah, and do you live where the population is dense, or do you have a little bit of room?
Yes, I do live in a densely populated, but the thing is that I'm planning to move to the countryside, and
good for you.
And there, yeah, and actually, I wanted to ask you one more question, and I see that music is coming.
Yeah, of course.
So should I wait for it, or should I ask right now?
No, I'd like you to hold. Okay, sure. And through the commercial break, it's going to be about 7 minutes, and then we'll take your questions. So please stay with us. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Rich Scheben's with us today. And Rich, I am delighted that Arju called from New Jersey. Here is a perfect example, class, of a man who wants to grow his own food, something that we've been talking about here for almost 10 years. Arju, please continue.
Yes, my next question is, I heard yesterday you had your master's, and then you had a $20,000 with a federal job or a government job. So what inspired you to leave that job and then do farming? How did that transition happen, and why did you decide to do that?
Okay, well, one day I was looking out the window in a multi-story office building where I was building computer systems. And I realized that there were two ways out of town. I could go north and south on the interstate. And if everyone said, you know what, let's get out of Dodge at the same time, I'd never be able to get out. So I said, this is crazy. And I decided that because I was always interested in doing things better, at least my opinion, no matter what it was, I wanted to improve it. If I had a vehicle, I wanted to get more miles per gallon. I wanted to have lower rolling resistance. I used to build race engines, and I used to race cars. And I was always tinkering with all kinds of things, electronic things, mechanical things, automotive things. And I was used to hard work. So I thought, you know what? If farmers can do it, I can do it too. So I decided that we would buy a farm. Of course, I talked with my wife about it, and so we bought our very first farm, and I've been a farmer ever since. So it was a dramatic change in lifestyle. I had a boss when I was at one of my banking positions, and the boss was pretty mean, and I was the guy he was. He would take out his frustrations on. And it was very, very difficult. It was a stressful job, and I thought, really, why would I want to do this? So I decided that I would become a real estate investor. And I started buying, one building at a time. And then I spent so much money. I spent over $1 million in a year buying buildings. And then I learned that the bank was my friend. The more you owe them, the more they are your friends, and they want to help make sure that you don't fail. So I learned how to become a real estate investor. And, I've done a bunch of things in my life, and I decided that I wanted to be, after I did the real estate investing, I realized I could control my own destiny, and I did not have to be tied to a paycheck. I could make my own paycheck. I could work whatever hours I wanted, and I decided that after that I sold all my real estate very quickly, bought a farm, and became a farmer and learned how to raise cows. And that's what I did. So, it's just, are you willing to take that leap? Rich Scheben did something quite similar. He went from New York City to becoming a farmer in Montana. So we took that leap. It was a calculated leap. And I want to tell you that Rich Scheben is an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. And you've probably heard that entrepreneurs are risk takers, and nothing can be farther from the truth than that. Entrepreneurs are painfully allergic to risks, painfully. And so we do everything we can to minimize risks and to minimize loss. That's what we do. So we're very, very careful. Now, I'm talking about entrepreneurs that use their own money. Now, entrepreneurs that use other people's money, they're not so careful. But we are, because we're using our money. So does that sort of answer your question? I wanted to be in control of my own destiny, and I was willing to take the risk. A very, very, very tiny risk.
Yeah, it certainly does. And the thing that you mentioned that you want to minimize risk, I read a book called Richest Man in Babylon.
Yes.
And there they mentioned, one of the principles was to succeed, you have to minimize your failures. And once you do that, then success will come to you. So I mean, it definitely answers my question. But thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
Sure, and please call in again. I'm delighted. Before you go, Arju, what can we do to do a better job here at USA Prepares?
I think you guys are doing a perfect job. I just started listening to you guys 1 week, 2 weeks back, and the rationale behind your radio show is I think there's a lot of truth to it. There is a lot of food shortages that is going on throughout the world. Businesses are collapsing. So I don't know what's going to happen here. So we don't know what's after 1 month, 2 months. In 1 month we have lost so many jobs. There's nobody knows what lies ahead right now. So I mean, maybe nothing will happen. Maybe we will get back just to our normal life. like nothing happens, everything is just fine. It's also a possibility. But we don't know what's going to happen in future. But like you guys are like very, very, very close to the truth. And and I hope things return to normal here. But I think but I do really enjoy your show. I listen to it for past 2 weeks. I'm listening to it from past 2 weeks, and I'm really enjoying the show.
Arju, let me tell you, you can hope. I appreciate all those kind words that you said, and I know Rich does too. You can hope that things are going to return to normal soon. The reality is they are not. They are not. They cannot. They cannot return to normal soon because so many people have lost their jobs, and some of the young people have had a taste of what it's like to get paid and not work. And what I'm reading on the news through my research is they don't want to go back. I mean, they like the freedom of not having to work and not having to worry about their bills. They like the fact that they can't pay the rent and they don't have to worry about that. So this is a whole new world where people have been exposed to getting things for free as compared to what Rich Scheben and I have done, which is work all our lives and, scrimp and save and be frugal and have that kind of an outlook on life. But as far as the hope, I wouldn't put too much hope in this turning around soon because I don't believe it will. And if you want to survive, I suggest you. There's a book that you might want to read, and I don't know if it's even available. It's called The Have More Plan. I'm going to look it up to make sure that I've said that right. Have More Plan, and it's a book that talks about what happened. So gasoline was cheap, fuel was cheap, and people used to work, let's say, in Brooklyn, and there were factories in Brooklyn. There were shirt factories and scissor factories and so forth, where we made all kinds of parts and machinery and clothing and things that people wanted to buy were made in the cities. The machinery was in the cities. So people lived in the cities. They walked to work. They lived in apartments, and they could walk to work. Then some people said, you know what, because gasoline is so inexpensive, maybe 10, 15, 20 cents a gallon, we could move outside of the city, have a little bit of land, and drive back and forth to work. And that's what they did. And it was all built on inexpensive energy. So people could literally live where you do in New Jersey and get to New York to work. And that's what happened. So someone who lives in New Jersey can live on an acre of land, let's say, and, spend the hour or 2 hours to get to New York City to work and make a lot of money. Well, that's what happened. And that is in a book called The Have More Plan. It's combined with another book called The Long Emergency, Long Emergency. You might want to look up those two books. But the Have More Plan says, you can get a couple chickens. You can raise a garden. You can have your own eggs from your chickens. And the chickens will, help make that manure that you need to make the garden grow. So you can have a property that is bigger, larger, and you can be more independent of the system. So that's what Rich Scheben did. That's what I've done. That's what Norm Shealy has done. That's what a bunch of Gwyneth Isaacs in Australia, we've all done that. We've all said, you know what? We'd rather live in a more poor area and have more land and do more work and be more independent. So there's gives and takes on the whole equation. So is it easy doing what Rich Scheben does? Absolutely not. Is it rewarding? Yes, it is. And the same with me and Norm and Gwyneth. All of us work way harder than the average bear, way harder. But it's so much more rewarding. I was outside last night with the family. We were walking around on the farm. Couldn't hear a thing. Not one sound. I mean, other than, the bugs. You can hear the bugs making noises, and you can hear the cows mooing. Other than that, there's no horns, there's no sirens, there's no airplane engines, there's no breaking of the sound barrier. It's really quiet here. And you can have that too, Arju.
Yeah, that's what I'm planning now. I'm planning to have a little bit of land in a house and try to like learn first, like how to grow like small crops, like that. And but that's more of my hobby also, like I actually, like I want to grow something, like in the ground, like I've never done this before, but I want to do this, like, and it's just a passion from inside rather than what is going on throughout the world. It's not that. It's just like I just want to do it,
Okay. Here's a simple way to get started. And this is what we've done with children over the years. You get some radish seeds, okay? And get a bucket. You can buy some if you can't find dirt in your yard, you can go to the Chinese factory outlet, Walmart, and get some soil. And you want to make sure it does not contain industrial waste, which would be from the sewer system. Make sure it does not contain that. And get some radish seeds and plant them according to what the seed packet says, and keep them in the sun and watered and warm, and you will be successful. Okay, and it's really wonderful, and that's what children do. We want children to be successful, because if you're not successful the first time that you have your little garden, and it can be in a bucket, you might want to throw in the towel after that and say, it doesn't work, it's too hard. But if you're successful, then you can get bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what Rich Scheben's done. I'm sure that's what we've done. That's what my parents did. We've all started small, and we've had a little success, and then we build on that. Any comments, Rich? We've got Craig in New York on hold.
Yeah, I just want to give RJ, or however he pronounces his name, pardon me, a little extra incentive, because when you go to the store, a lot of potatoes, are sprayed with chemicals to slow down budding shoots and rot, and they also radiated, which destroys nutrition and vitamins. I want to give a few more incentives after the break, if that's okay with you, Vince. Okay,
we've got Craig on hold. He's been holding for 12 minutes, 26 seconds. Craig, if you don't mind staying with us, we'll talk about rototillers. If you can just do that in a couple minutes. Arju, if you want to stay on, you're certainly welcome to do that. You guys are the kind of guys that we get excited about, because you're actually doing something. Rich Scheben's with us. Arju is in New Jersey, and Craig is on hold in New York. Rich, if you can just give us a few quick comments for Arju, and then we'll move on to Craig.
Yeah, Arju, the benefits of gardening is endless. You get your vitamins and minerals from the soil, so when you buy your vegetables or produce in the store, you don't know what you're getting. Plus, you have a chance of getting salmonella, listeria, E. coli. You're eating a lot of fat-free products when you go to the supermarket, like MSG, aspartame, artificial sweeteners, nicotine, high fructose corn syrup, a lot designed to be addictive, including propylene glycol, which is addictive in foods and used as an antifreeze. So you want to keep away from anything synthetic, artificial, refined, and processed, and think immune stimulant versus immune suppressant like sugar. Think onions, garlic, cayenne pepper, ginger, horseradish, cabbage family. And keep in mind, Monsanto, 96% of shareholders voted to not disclose GMO ingredients. If that doesn't get your hackles up, nothing will. So think about growing your own produce in your own soil and knowing what you put in the soil on the produce so you can get the best benefits of nutrition.
There you go.
There you go. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Arju. Please call back. We'd love to hear from you. Yep. Craig in New York, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Vince. Hi, Rich.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. I have a 30 by 40 garden in the backyard. I want to double that. And I did have a cultivator at one point. It doesn't run right. So I was thinking about getting the next size up rototiller. But I'm the frugal guy, and I'd like to, maybe buy a used one. Is there any tips that you can give me, or a name brand that you trust?
Sure. What's wrong with the one you have?
It's a cultivator, so it's kind of small. It's 2-cycle. It was a Craftsman. It never ran right from the beginning. The throttle would be inoperable. I'm slightly mechanical inclined, so I would send it to a shop. It would come back, run right for an hour or two, and then a different problem would happen with it.
Okay. All right. So I do have an answer, and I'm sure Rich does as well. I've only owned a few different rototillers. One was an Aaron's, but it was in the 1960s, and it was used, and it had high-speed tines, not shaped like an L, just straight tines, and it had little cutters on the tines, and it would finely cut the soil, but you can't have rocks with that. So if you have any rocks like we do here, you need spaced tines. You can't have real fine tines. They've got to be heavy duty. And, of course, that puts you in the Troy-built arena. Now, the Troy-built used to have a really fine reputation, and it had an American-made Kohler engine. Some of them had Briggs & Stratton engines. They have cheapened them over the years, and they are not as good as they used to be. So we have two rototillers. We have one's called a Horse, which is about 10 horsepower, and it's really heavy, and it's really hard to start. I mean, it's a real hard pull. And it will do the garden of the size that you want to expand to. It'll be fine. We have another one, which is called a Bronco. It's made by Troy-built as well. It's a little tiny one. Well, it's not real tiny, but it's about 5.5 horsepower or so. And it's really lightweight, and it's really flimsy. And typically, it's about $500 if you get one at a really good sale. But it's really flimsy compared to the Horse. The Horse is the kind of thing that you buy one, and if you take care of it, it'll last you for a long time. The Bronco probably will last maybe 6-7 years, and it would be that would be about the maximum size garden that you were growing into that you use this Bronco for. I like the Bronco because it's lightweight, but lightweight means less durable. We've already broken tines on it. The tines are made in China. The engine's made in China. We have to fill the transmission of it every time we use it because the seals are worn out. And this thing probably only has 20 hours on it. So what I'm saying is it's a really flimsy device. But all of them are. And the other comparable models are worse than this. So I think that's probably going to be your best choice. I'd love to hear what Rich Scheben has to say. Craig, can you hold?
I cannot today, but I'll try to call back on Tuesday when Rich is back on.
Okay. That sounds good. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you, though.
See you, Craig.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care, Rich. Thanks.
Rich, if you want to give us your opinion on rototillers when we come back, I'd love to hear it. We're talking about rototillers with Rich Scheben, and just a quick thumbnail sketch of what to think about. There are front tine rototillers where the tines are in the front of the tiller. There are rear tine tillers, which the tines are in the back closest to the operator of the rototiller. And there are rototillers that have counter-rotating tines. So what happens is, think of a rototiller with rear tines that has tires with deep cleats in them to drive the rototiller forward. So it's self-propelled, very slow, self-propelled. And the tires are pulling the rototiller forward, and the tines are rotating backwards. So the tines want to go backwards. The tires want to go forward. And that combination of forward and backward really enables the tiller to dig in better. Okay, it's easier on the operator. Now, I'm looking at Home Depot. They say they have a Super Bronco 16-inch, which is what we have, a Super Bronco, and it has an overhead valve engine, rear tine, counter-rotating gas tiller with one-hand operation. That's nuts, okay? There's no such thing as one-hand operation. Maybe if you're on the beach and you're in sand or something. But if you're actually in soil, you need to have two hands on the rototiller. So don't be misled by, super easy. It's not super easy. It's work. It's work. If you're strong, it's work. And I paid $300 for it used. The guy bought it and didn't know how to put the belt on it, so he sold it for $300. I paid him his asking price. And I see now that same darn thing is $799, $800, more than twice what I paid for it, almost 3 times the price. So these things are not cheap anymore. They are really, really expensive. Rich, Scheben, any comments before we take George's call in New Hampshire?
Yeah, I just want to mention real quick, when I heard the news just now, I just heard part of it, so pardon me if I don't have the whole thing in context, saying about President Trump not discussing something about chlorine properly. I think he might have been talking about chlorine dioxide, which is MMS. It's basically registered by the FDA for methicillin-resistant staph, and it's basically a powerful oxidizer, and it destroys poison, neutralizes chemicals, and kills parasites and releases heat energy. So that could have been the context what he was discussing, because the mainstream media often takes things out of context, so I just wanted to throw that out there. And regarding rototilling, I use raised beds. I don't use a rototiller. I start my seeds with heirloom seeds in my solarium, and then I bring them outside when they're small plants, and I use a pitchfork, and I literally pitchfork each spot so my soil is aerated in that spot. And I love raised beds because it heats up my soil earlier in the year, keeps it warmer later in the year, and my nutrition that I put into the soil does not leach out. It stays in that area. So that's my short answer since George is on.
Okay, and Gwyneth has a term for what you do, and she calls that shovel therapy. And so she does it with a shovel and a pitchfork as well. George in New Hampshire, welcome.
Hi, Vincent. Hi, Rich.
Hey.
I don't mean to cut you off, Rich, what you were saying about the rototiller.
Oh, no worries, buddy.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I appreciate this opportunity, Vincent, and the fine programming that you bring to the air. I just was calling about a situation where I know this is a very stressful time for many people, and I've witnessed this professionally as well as personally. What stress or an ongoing crisis state of mind can do to the human body. And the reason I'm bringing it up is that your body is your tool chest, it's your vehicle, it's your protection from the elements, and also it's your digester of your food and energy. So you have we all have remarkable bodies. Granted, some of us are older, some of us might have certain illnesses or disabilities, and yet we still function with this remarkable device that the Creator gave us. I am saying this for a reason. Parkinson's disease. If you're in a hyper state of vigilance all of the time, and I've experienced this myself from the military, where, you're going, in other words, the gentlemen and the ladies on this program that give their time are not shock jocks. They're not just trying to keep you tuned with just, basically impacting you constantly to up the ratings. They're trying to give you good practical advice. And I'm sorry to be so long-winded, but there's a point that I wanted to make, and it was that I have seen people who would listen to the likes, and this is my opinion now, of like a Rush Limbaugh, who basically had a drug addiction problem. And he also had hearing implants because he couldn't hear anymore, but he was constantly beating the drum. I would call it a motor mouth syndrome. Michael Savage, in my opinion, is another one where they said he had a dog in the corner, and the dog would get sick. And I couldn't listen to more than 5 minutes. Now, again, this is my observation. I have seen people who would turn on the radio, listen to one shock jock, then turn on the radio and switch it to another dial. And I saw them over a pattern of many years. They started to develop the shakes or Parkinson's because your nerves have a coating that can burn away like it's overheating an electrical device, as I'm sure you, Vince, and you, Rich, could attest to. You don't want to burn yourself out. And sometimes you have to turn away from the overload of information, of crisis information, and sometimes just take a nice warm soaking bath, go for a walk, or ride a bicycle, even if it's on the end of a street, and just get back to nature, look at the world, give thanks and appreciation that you're in a country where, everything's pretty much the same as it was, with the fact that there's another random element floating around out there that could impact us negatively and impacting us negatively, but we're heading for an island. All right, maybe one ship is going down, but we're going to an island, and it's a new adventure ahead. We don't know what's going to be at the island. We don't know what's going to be there. And I'm just saying I don't want to see people get to the point where they debilitate themselves through worry, whereas like your program, Vincent, and your tutorials, Rick, is telling us, or both of yours, is telling us to basically prepare, and I'm sorry to be so long-winded.
Oh, that's fine, George. That's why we give a lot of statistics, a lot of facts, a lot of financial, economic, social, and political rationales, but we try to dovetail that with ideas and solutions. I mean, I'm blue in the face talking about how we need to basically regain our balance between technology and nature. And a lot of this information that comes from the mainstream media is not real accurate. Like this, here's a study from New York City, 94% of patients who had morbidity had underlying other diseases, okay? And the mortality rate for this COVID-19, another article, is 25 to 60% less than government and media claims. That tells me that they are sensationalizing for control, and that's why I went through the agenda reasons earlier in the show. So I think there is a lot of good news there after, we get through with it and really find out what the facts are versus the propaganda. And I'm not saying that they're not going to create a secondary infection on us. I don't know what they're going to do. But I think right now is the perfect time, if you haven't done it, to start growing a garden, to start thinking about living rural, to start thinking about being self-sufficient. Go back to basics. Just think things like food, water, and shelter. Think just if you live in urban, suburban America, just think food, water, and shelter right now. And think about nature, like George just said, because nature is soothing, it's healing, and you can grow your own garden, you can go hunting and fishing, and you can harvest edible and medicinal plants, you can go bird watching, you can study silviculture and dendrology. There's so much to do. Here in Montana, I am so busy, and it's just the lifestyle is truly a blessing. Vince?
I've got a comment about that. So I have a relative through marriage who built houses in the near New York City, happened to be in New Jersey, stone houses, really nice, wonderful stone houses. And then what happened is the builder would take a deposit on these houses, start the construction, and payments would come forth as the house progressed. So these were not, bang 'em out type houses. These were really high quality houses. The October crash, 1929, happened, and everything stopped. So the deposit stopped, and there was no money to build anything. Materials were hard to find. Everything stopped, kind of like now. And so this relative of mine, through marriage, stopped building houses and bought a farm, moved south and bought a farm, a little over 100 acres, and started raising crops. So what I'm saying is, here's a guy really bright guy, who he worked for himself, building houses, and he decided to take the plunge and learn how to farm. And that's what he did. So he bought a little over 100-acre farm. And so what happened was he turned lemons into lemonade. He took a really bad situation, the first Great Depression, and bought a farm and raised food, which was necessary for everybody. And it worked. And it worked for the rest of his life. So that's what you can do. You can do that. There are farms for sale, and you can learn how to do it. Now, if you can sell your house, it might be a great way to go. This might be a real great blessing in disguise. And the benefits of doing that is you'll be farther, at a distance farther from people. And, George, I'm thinking about you specifically. I would just love to walk down the driveway here at our farm, across the road, and stand on our side of the road and just have a chat with you on your side of the road, until this virus thing is over. Then we can have coffee around the kitchen table. Wouldn't that be the neatest thing? I'd love it. And you'd be the perfect neighbor. And so would Rich. And so would Kyle.
Hey, Vince, did you get my
And so would
message this
Gwyneth.
morning? I sent you some smoke signals.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, so it can be done. It can be done. And is it a little bit unnerving to leave the safety of the status quo? Absolutely. You know, when we bought our first farm, it was dark at night because no one turned on the street lights. Well, they couldn't turn them on because there weren't any street lights. I took a class at IBM early in my computer career, like in the 70s. And I went to 909 3rd Avenue in New York City to IBM and learned a little bit about the way they do and build computer systems. And there was a gal in class, and she said, "How can you stand living in the country? You know, it's got to be terrifying." I said, "How many locks do you have on your door in the city?" She had 6 locks. And she thought, you know, she was safe, and living in the country was unsafe. Can you imagine that? We'll be right back. Okay, we've got three calls lined up, and we have very little time. I just want to tell you very quickly, class, I looked up rototillers at Home Depot and Lowe's. Out of stock, unavailable for pickup. So something has happened in the demand and probably in the supply of rototillers. You can check Craigslist, and I got to tell you, I think the rear tine with the heavy tines in the rear are the way to go. And it looks like Troy-Bilt is probably your best choice. George, we've got some other calls. Anything that we can help you with quickly?
If I may say, sure. This world, one thing you can guarantee is change. Our ancestors had to leave behind. 500 years ago, there wasn't any cities. There was just vast forest with various tribes scattered across this nation, across this land. All I'm saying is that you're in a wonderful position right now in the sense that it's soon to be May. You're at the very beginning of the growing season. You've just come through a winter and spring, and you have a lot of raw materials, and you're in the richest country in the world. So if you don't make something out of this, and you don't sit down, and I'll leave it with this, antidoteforall.com, it's free. It'll center you and give you a break from whatever cobwebs or chains are forming up around you, and you'll see what freedom really is. And this is a blessing in disguise. And I mean this, and that's what you, Vincent, is saying, and that's what you, Rich, are saying. God bless you all, and all right, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. Take care.
God bless George. That's George, USA Prepares Instructor. Kyle in Montana, then Steve in New Mexico. Kyle, welcome.
Good morning, gentlemen. I was just going to go because I wanted to be the first shock jock on USA Prepares. But no, the main I totally agree with you on those rototillers, Vince. This last fall, an old boy had a garage sale because he was moving, and I was able to pick up the Troy-Bilt horse. It's the one that's a little bit, I think it's the 5-horse or 7-horse. I can't remember now. Anyway, with a snowplow on it.
It's at least right? 8. It's at least 8. Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay.
We have the same one.
I know that much. And for $150 just because he was moving. So, folks, hit Craigslist.
Wow.
The other thing on the other thing that you might want to really think about, I know you don't really care for front tine tillers, and I didn't either until you get one of them little mantis tillers. If you're doing raised beds and it don't throw the dirt out of the bed very bad, you can get one of those little mantis two-stroke mantis tillers. I bought one for $75 at a garage sale, brought it home, put a $14 carburetor on it, and the thing's been running now for, good grief, close to 10 years that my wife and I have had this thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with you. If you're just going to do a touch-up on soil, that's really easy. A mantis front tine 2-cycle is great. The only problem with them is the clutches. They will tend to burn out, and you have to run them out of fuel so that you don't destroy the carburetor. I absolutely agree with that. But if you have rough soil like we do here, it won't survive. It won't survive. You need, cast iron type tines in a rear tine. I agree with you. Very good,
Yep,
Kyle.
I agree.
And that price that you paid, $150 for a horse that's between 8 and 10 horsepower, that is a beast. That is a steal. Typically, I looked the price up for the horse right now, $2,600.
I know it, Vince. That's why
But you can't get them because they're out of stock.
Right. One time, too, about 15 years ago, Vince, I bought a 8-horsepower rear tine Sears and Roebuck for $75 at a garage sale because it had a busted rear. The tine itself, the shaft was broke right where the bolt was. So I ground that down and put it to a point, made a fillet weld, put it back on there, re-drilled the hole, and I've been using that one still ever since. So, folks, if you're willing to work on them or even have them worked on a little bit, sometimes you can get them. I'll hang up, let somebody else get on.
Kyle, thank you so much for calling in.
Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah. Steve in New Mexico, welcome. Steve in New Mexico, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, Vince and Rich. I just want to thank you guys for all your experience, in your farming and how to grow gardens. And what I need to know, Vince, I haven't started a garden in 4 years, and the area I have is going to be about 20 by 20. And you were talking about that fertilizer 13. And I was wondering how many bags of that would I need? How many bags would I need for that area?
Okay, here's what I would do. I'd buy 2 bags minimum just to have it, okay? And assuming that it's going to be difficult to get in the future. So what I use is a small trowel, and I put a small amount at each plant. I don't fertilize the whole garden, just each plant. Now, I would rather use compost. I really would. Yeah. But if you don't have compost, you got to get these plants started. And the way to do it is 13, 13, 13. If you use too much, you're going to burn the plants. Look it up on YouTube. Look it up on the internet. Maybe a teaspoon full of fertilizer scattered, let's say 6 inches around the plant. That's what I would do. Rich Scheben, 10 seconds?
Yeah, I would say go for it, folks. Think of adventure, skill sets, nutrition, variety. What if you had a goal, a dream of a new life, and you didn't have the guts to pull the trigger? Go for it. Life is short.